Welcome to Monk's Temple. Have you ever noticed how two people can go through the exact same experience and come out completely different? One person loses their job and falls into a depression that lasts for years, convinced the world has turned against them. Another person loses their job and within months has started a successful business they never would have dared to try. Same event. Two different lives. We see this everywhere. A couple goes through a divorce. One spends the rest of their life bitter, unable to trust again. The other eventually looks back with gratitude for what they learned and grows capable of deeper love than before. A serious diagnosis comes. One person becomes their illness, defined by it, consumed by fear. Another person, facing the same prognosis, discovers an appreciation for each remaining day that transforms their relationships and brings them a peace they never knew. What makes the difference? Is it luck? Genetics? Some people are just born stronger. The Buddha looked at this question 2,500 years ago, and what he found changed everything. He saw that the difference is not in the event. It never was. The difference is in the mind. Not the mind as a passive receiver, but the mind as an active creator. He put it like this in the very first verses of the Dhammapada, his most famous collection of teachings, Manopubhagam Dhamma. The mind is the forerunner of all things. The mind is chief. All phenomena are mind-made. Think about the power in that statement. It means you are not just living in a world that happens to you. You are building the world you live in, moment by moment, with your attention, your interpretations, your intentions. The raw material of life comes in through your senses, yes. But what you do with that material, the structure you build from it, that is entirely up to you. Most of us live our entire lives without realizing this. We walk around thinking we are tenants in a building we never chose. We complain about the drafty windows of our anxiety. We curse the leaky roof of our old resentments. We feel trapped by the poor foundation of our self-doubt. We are victims of the structure, or so we believe. But what if I told you that you are not the tenant? What if I told you that you are the architect? The blueprint for your entire experience is held in the space between one thought and the next. You have been drawing it your whole life, mostly without knowing it. And here is the good news. If you can learn to see the blueprint, you can learn to change it. Let me tell you a story about this. There was once a man who lived in a small apartment in a crowded city. His apartment was on a busy street, and outside his window, every night, a group of young men would gather and play loud music until 2 or 3 in the morning. They laughed, they shouted, they revved their motorcycles. The man tried everything. He called the police. He shouted out his window. He bought earplugs. Nothing worked. Every night, the noise invaded his home, and with it came a storm of rage. He would lie in bed, jaw clenched, heart pounding, rehearsing arguments in his head. He became a prisoner in his own home. Then one night, something shifted. He was lying there, the bass thumping through his walls, the anger rising in his chest as usual. But this time, a tiny space opened. In that space, he heard a question from somewhere deep inside himself. Who is suffering more right now, you or them? He looked at the image in his mind. Down on the street, the young men were laughing, drinking, having the time of their lives. They had no idea he existed. They were not lying in bed, jaw clenched, heart pounding, plotting revenge. They were free. And up in his apartment, he was the one in chains. He was the one whose blood pressure was spiking. He was the one missing sleep, missing peace, missing his own life. The noise was just noise. The suffering was something he was adding to it, all by himself. In that moment, he saw it clearly. The noise was not his enemy. His reaction to the noise was his enemy. And his reaction was something happening entirely inside his own mind. Which meant it was something he could work with. He took a breath. Then another. He felt the anger still there, but he stopped feeding it. He stopped rehearsing the arguments. He just let the noise be noise. It was still annoying. But it was no longer tormenting. He fell asleep 10 minutes later. The young men never changed. The noise never stopped. But the man was free. Because he finally understood where the real problem lived. It lived in his mind. And that is the only place it can ever be solved. This is the first and most crucial insight the Buddha offers us. Your suffering is not in the event. It is in the story you tell yourself about the event. The loss is just the loss. The pain is just the pain. The disappointment is just the disappointment. The suffering, the lasting, gnawing, soul-crushing suffering, is what your mind builds on top of it with the bricks of your stories, your shoulds, your whys. And if your mind can build that prison, it can also build the key that unlocks it. If this resonates with you, if you sense that there might be another way to live, please take a moment to subscribe to Monk's Temple. It's a simple gesture that helps this work continue, and it ensures we can keep exploring these ancient paths to modern peace together. Just click the button below. Thank you. Now that we've seen how the mind builds our experience, we need a practical way to observe this process in action. We need a tool that allows us to study the mind without getting lost in its stories. The Buddha offered such a tool, and it has been used for thousands of years. It is mindfulness of breathing. But we must be careful here. The goal is not simply to watch the breath. The breath is just a vehicle. The destination is the mind itself. Think of it like this. If you want to study the behavior of a wild animal, you don't chase it through the forest. You find a quiet spot near a watering hole, and you sit very still. Eventually, the animal will come to you, and you can observe its habits up close without disturbing it. The breath is your quiet spot. It is the one physical process that is always happening, always available. It is a bridge between the conscious and unconscious, between the body and the mind. You can influence it, but it also runs on its own. By anchoring your attention to the breath, you create a stable observation post. And from that post, you can begin to watch the animal of your mind as it comes to drink. Let me tell you a story about a woman who discovered this for herself. She was a high-powered lawyer in a busy city firm. Her days were filled with deadlines, arguments, and endless demands on her attention. She was successful by every external measure, but internally she was a wreck. Her mind never stopped. It churned through scenarios, rehearsed conversations, worried about outcomes. Sleep was a luxury she could barely afford and rarely enjoyed. A friend suggested she try meditation. She was skeptical, but desperate enough to try anything. She found a class and learned to follow her breath. The first few times, it was a disaster. Her mind would not cooperate. She would try to focus on the breath, and within seconds she was drafting a legal brief or replaying an argument with a colleague. She thought she was failing. But her teacher explained something that changed everything. He said, "The goal is not to stop thinking. The goal is to see thinking." The breath is not a weapon to beat your mind into submission. It is an anchor to keep you from drifting away while you watch the storms pass. So she kept practicing. She kept coming back to the breath, 100 times, 1,000 times. And slowly, something shifted. She began to notice the space between thoughts. She began to see thoughts arise, hang for a moment, and then dissolve, all on their own. She saw that she did not have to chase every thought. She did not have to believe every thought. She could just watch. One evening, after a particularly brutal day in court, she sat down to meditate. Her mind was raging, full of anger and self-doubt. But instead of getting caught in it, she just watched. She noticed how the anger felt in her body, a tightness in her chest, a heat in her face. She noticed how the thoughts kept coming, each one trying to pull her into its story. And she just kept returning to the breath. After 45 minutes, something remarkable happened. The storm passed. The anger was gone. The self-doubt was gone. She was just sitting there, breathing, at peace. She had not solved any of the problems from court. She had not changed what happened. But she had changed her relationship to it. And in that change, she found a freedom she had never known was possible. This is what the breath offers us. It is not about escaping life. It is about learning to be present for life without being consumed by it. The breath teaches us that we can be with difficulty without becoming difficulty. We can feel anger without being angry people. We can have anxious thoughts without being anxious people. The breath is our anchor in the storm, our watering hole where we can watch the animals of mind come and go. And here is where it gets really interesting. As you sit with the breath, you begin to notice something fascinating. You are not just a passive observer of the air moving in and out. You are also, subtly, shaping it. When your mind is agitated, the breath becomes short and ragged. You have a thought about an argument you had earlier, and instantly, the next out-breath is a tight, frustrated sigh. The mind is fabricating the breath. It is using the breath to express its inner state. Then you can flip the script. You can start to use the breath to shape the mind. You notice the breath is tight, so you intentionally soften it. You make the next in-breath a little deeper, a little more calming. You are now using the process of fabrication skillfully. You are no longer a slave to the mind's unconscious habits. You are becoming its conscious trainer. This is the beginning of real freedom. Not controlling everything, but participating consciously in the shaping of your own experience. The breath is your first and most accessible tool for this participation. It is always here, always available, always honest about the state of your mind. Now we come to something that surprises many people. The Buddha's instructions for breath meditation are not passive. They are active. They involve training, adjusting, and intentionally shaping your experience. This is where we move from simply watching to actively participating in our own transformation. The Buddha laid out 16 steps for mindfulness of breathing, divided into 4 groups of 4. Each group focuses on a different area of experience: the body, feelings, the mind, and mental qualities. But here is the important part. You do not practice them in order like items on a checklist. All 4 areas are present at once, all the time. When you focus on the breath, your body is there. Feelings are there. Your mind state is there. Mental qualities are there. You shift your attention among them depending on what needs attention most in any given moment. Think of it like driving a car. You do not focus only on the steering wheel and ignore the gas pedal. You do not watch the speedometer exclusively and forget to look at the road. All the instruments matter. All the controls work together. You adjust based on what the car and the road are doing right now. Meditation is the same. You learn to read the instrument panel of your own experience and make constant, subtle adjustments. Let me tell you a story about a man who learned this lesson in a very unexpected way. He was a carpenter, highly skilled, known throughout his town for the quality of his furniture. He could look at a piece of wood and see the table hiding inside it. But he had a problem. His mind would not stop. When he worked, it was fine. His hands knew what to do, and the work absorbed his attention. But at night, lying in bed, his mind would race. It would worry about jobs not yet started, replay conversations from the day, imagine disasters that might never come. He tried meditation. He would lie in bed and try to follow his breath. But within seconds, his mind was off and running again. He thought he was failing. Then one day, a friend who also meditated said something that changed everything. He said, "You are trying to control your mind the way you control a piece of wood. You think you can clamp it down and force it to be still. But the mind is not wood. It is more like water. You cannot clamp water. You have to work with its nature." The carpenter thought about this. He realized that when he worked with wood, he did not fight it. He read it. He felt its grain, its moisture, its resistance. He worked with its nature, not against it. Maybe his mind needed the same approach. That night, when he lay down and his mind started racing, he did not fight it. He just noticed it. He noticed the quality of the energy. It was agitated, yes, but it was also creative. It was generating possibilities, scenarios, solutions. Instead of trying to stop it, he just watched it. He stayed with the breath, but he let the thoughts flow around it like water around a stone. And something shifted. The thoughts did not stop, but they slowed. They lost their urgency. He fell asleep faster than he had in months. The next morning, he understood. His meditation was not failing. He had just been using the wrong approach. He needed to read his mind the way he read wood, with sensitivity, with patience, with respect for its nature. Some nights, his mind needed calming. Other nights, it needed channeling. His job was not to impose a single method on every situation. His job was to read the situation and respond appropriately. This is exactly what the Buddha's 16 steps teach us. They give us a range of tools, not a single technique. When the breath feels tight and constricted, you work with the body, relaxing, softening, spreading awareness through the whole body. When the mind feels dull and sleepy, you work with feelings, generating interest, refreshment, even rapture to energize the practice. When the mind is scattered, you work directly with the mind, gathering it, settling it, concentrating it. When you get stuck on something, you work with mental qualities, investigating, understanding, letting go. The first tetrad, focused on the body, trains you to become sensitive to the breath in all its varieties. Long breathing, short breathing. Deep, shallow, fast, slow. You learn to feel the breath not just at the nose, but throughout the whole body. Every cell breathing. Every pore open. This is not just watching. This is actively cultivating a new relationship with your own physical experience. The second tetrad, focused on feelings, trains you to work with pleasure and rapture. Yes, pleasure. The Buddha did not teach a grim, joyless path. He taught that joy is an essential part of practice. You learn to generate feelings of well-being through the way you breathe. You learn to suffuse your whole body with these feelings, like water soaking into parched ground. And then, when the time is right, you learn to calm even these feelings, moving toward deeper and more refined states of peace. The carpenter eventually became a meditation teacher himself. He would tell his students, "You already know how to do this. You just do not know that you know. When you work, you read the material. When you cook, you read the food. When you garden, you read the soil. Now learn to read your own mind. It is the same skill, turned inward. And it will serve you better than any external skill ever could." Now we arrive at a fascinating aspect of this practice. The mind that is training itself must also observe itself. It must be both teacher and student, both coach and athlete. This creates a beautiful paradox. How can the mind watch itself? How can it be both the observer and the observed? The Buddha understood this paradox deeply. He taught that the mind is not a single, solid thing. It is more like a committee, with many different voices, many different members, each with its own perspective, its own desires, its own fears. When we meditate, we are not trying to silence the committee. We are learning to be its chairperson. We are learning to listen to all the voices, to understand them, and to guide them toward a wiser, more harmonious way of being. Let me tell you a story about a woman who discovered this committee in a very dramatic way. She was a CEO of a successful company, responsible for hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in revenue. She was decisive, confident, and respected by everyone who worked for her. But inside, there was chaos. There was the voice that drove her, pushing her to work harder, achieve more, never rest. There was the voice that criticized her, telling her she was not good enough, that any mistake would be catastrophic. There was the voice that feared failure, that lay awake at night imagining worst-case scenarios. And there was the voice that just wanted to run away, to escape to a beach somewhere and never make another decision again. She thought these voices were her. She identified with all of them, which meant she was constantly at war with herself. The driving voice fought with the fearful voice. The critical voice attacked the escaping voice. There was no peace, only endless internal conflict. Then she attended a meditation retreat. On the third day, sitting in silence, following her breath, something shifted. She heard all the voices at once, but for the first time, she did not feel like she was any of them. She was the one hearing them. She was the space in which they appeared. She was the chairperson, not any single member of the committee. In that moment, everything changed. She saw that the driving voice was just one part of her, not the whole. It had good intentions, wanting her to succeed, but it did not need to run the show. The fearful voice was just another part, trying to protect her, but its warnings did not need to control her decisions. She could listen to all of them, appreciate their concerns, and then make her own choice about how to proceed. This insight transformed her leadership. She became calmer, more decisive, less reactive. She could hear criticism without collapsing. She could face fear without freezing. She was no longer a battlefield of warring factions. She was a wise leader of a diverse and sometimes difficult internal team. The Buddha identified 3 key members of this committee that are especially important in meditation. First, there is the self that desires the result. This is the part that wants to be peaceful, that wants to be free from suffering, that wants to understand the nature of mind. This part provides the motivation, the initial spark. It is why you are listening to this right now. Second, there is the self that does the work. This is the part that actually sits on the cushion, that brings attention back to the breath 100 times, 1,000 times. This is the part that learns the skills, that makes the effort, that shows up day after day even when progress seems slow. It is the practitioner, the athlete, the one in the arena. Third, there is the self that observes and reflects. This is the part that steps back and notices how the practice is going. It is the part that can say, that method of breathing made me more agitated, let us try something else. Or, that feeling of calm is really nice, how did I create that? This is the part that learns from experience and guides the other 2. It is the coach, the teacher, the wise elder. In a well-functioning mind, these 3 selves work together in harmony. The desiring self provides the vision. The working self provides the effort. The observing self provides the wisdom. But often, they are at war. The desiring self wants enlightenment right now and gets frustrated with the slow pace of the working self. The working self gets tired and wants to quit, but the observing self just criticizes it for being weak. The chairperson's job is to bring these voices into a productive dialogue. Imagine a master chef in her kitchen. She has a vision for an extraordinary meal. That is the desiring self. She has line cooks doing the actual work, chopping, stirring, plating. That is the working self. And she has a sous chef who watches everything, tasting, adjusting, noticing when something is off. That is the observing self. The master chef does not shout at the line cooks. She does not ignore the sous chef's observations. She integrates all of them, creating a flow where each contributes according to its strength. Your meditation practice is that kitchen. Your desire for peace is the master chef's vision. Your effort to stay with the breath is the line cook's work. And the mindfulness that notices when you have wandered off, that reflects on what works and what does not, is the invaluable sous chef. Learning to be a good chairperson of this inner committee is the essence of the path. It is not about silencing any voice. It is about giving each voice its proper place and following the wisdom that emerges from their harmonious integration. Now we come to one of the most misunderstood aspects of this entire path. We often think spiritual practice is about being serious, even grim. We think we must struggle against our own dark impulses, fight our desires, conquer our demons. But the Buddha taught something very different. He taught that the path is built on happiness. Not the fleeting happiness of sense pleasures, but a deeper, more refined happiness that comes from skillfulness itself. He called this gladdening the mind. It is the art of intentionally lifting your own spirits, of finding reasons to be joyful on the path. This is not optional. It is essential. The mind will not stay with something that feels like a chore. It will rebel. It will seek out its old, familiar, but unskillful pleasures. You have to make the path more attractive than the old habits. You have to show the mind that peace is not a deprivation. It is a relief. Let me tell you a story about a man who discovered this in a very unexpected way. He was a truck driver, long hauls across the country, weeks away from home. His life was lonely and monotonous. He filled the empty hours with junk food, cheap coffee, and talk radio that kept him angry and agitated. He knew this was not good for him, but he did not know what else to do. One day, a friend gave him a recording of a meditation teacher. He listened skeptically at first, but something in the voice made him keep listening. The teacher said something that stopped him cold. She said, "You cannot hate yourself into peace. You cannot bully yourself into happiness. The only way to change is to find joy in the change itself." He thought about this for days. He realized that all his attempts to improve himself had been based on self-criticism. He was trying to force himself to be better by telling himself how terrible he was. It never worked for long. The shame would fade, and he would go back to his old habits. So he tried something different. On his next long haul, instead of turning on the angry talk radio, he turned it off. He just drove in silence for a while. Then he started to notice things he had not seen in years. The way the sunrise painted the sky above the plains. The mist rising from rivers in the early morning. The kindness of a waitress in a small town diner. He started to feel gratitude instead of resentment. He started to feel glad just to be alive. He did not meditate in a formal way. He just drove with more awareness, more appreciation. And something shifted. The junk food lost its appeal. The anger faded. He started calling his family more often, telling them he loved them. His life did not look different from the outside, but from the inside, it was transformed. He had gladdened his own mind, and the mind had responded by showing him a better way to live. The Buddha taught several specific ways to gladden the mind. One is through reflection. You can reflect on your good fortune. You have a human life, with enough freedom and leisure to practice. You have encountered teachings that point the way to genuine peace. That is incredibly rare. Just that reflection can produce a sense of appreciation and joy. Another way is through perception. As you breathe, you can intentionally cultivate a sense of gratitude for the body that supports you, for the breath that sustains you moment by moment. You can imagine that with each in-breath, you are breathing in kindness and clarity. With each out-breath, you are sending out goodwill to all beings. This simple shift in perception can transform the entire meditation. A third way is through the cultivation of beautiful mental states. The Buddha taught 4 of these, called the Brahmaviharas or divine abodes. They are goodwill, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. These are not just nice ideas. They are powerful mental fabrications that directly counteract the unskillful states of ill will, cruelty, envy, and anxiety. Goodwill is the wish for all beings to be happy, yourself included. Not a vague wish, but a genuine intention. You can start with yourself, wishing for your own genuine well-being. Then you extend it to those you love, then to neutral people, then even to those you find difficult. This practice softens the heart and opens the mind. Compassion is the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. When you see suffering, in yourself or others, you do not turn away. You open to it with kindness. You wish for its end. This practice dissolves the walls we build between ourselves and others. Empathetic joy is the ability to rejoice in the happiness of others. This one is tricky because we are often trained to compare ourselves to others, to feel envy when they succeed. But empathetic joy is the direct antidote to envy. It is the happiness we feel when others are happy, no conditions attached. Equanimity is the wisdom that knows we cannot control everything. It is the peace that comes from accepting that beings are responsible for their own actions. We wish them well, but we do not demand that they conform to our wishes. This practice brings a deep and abiding calm. The truck driver discovered all of this without knowing its names. He found goodwill in the kindness of strangers. He found gratitude in sunrises. He found joy in simply being alive. And his life transformed because he had gladdened his own mind. There is another story about a woman who used these practices in a time of great difficulty. She was going through a painful divorce. Her anger at her ex-husband was consuming her. She could not sleep. She could not work. She could not think about anything except her pain. A friend suggested she try a loving-kindness practice. She was skeptical. She did not feel loving or kind toward anyone, least of all herself. But she was desperate enough to try anything. She sat down each day and repeated simple phrases. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be free from suffering. At first, the words felt hollow. She did not believe them. But she kept going. After several weeks, something shifted. The hard shell around her heart began to soften. She found she could extend the wish to her friends, then to neutral people, then even to her ex-husband. Not because she approved of what he had done, but because she saw that his own suffering had caused him to act badly. She wished for his freedom from that suffering. And in that wishing, she found her own freedom. She later said, I thought forgiveness was something I gave to him. But I was wrong. Forgiveness was something I gave to myself. Gladdening my mind was the only way out of the prison I had built. This is the power of gladdening. It is not about ignoring pain. It is about creating a foundation of well-being strong enough to hold the pain without collapsing. It is about giving the mind a taste of something better so it no longer wants to return to its old habits. Now we arrive at a stage in the practice that requires both subtlety and strength. After learning to gladden the mind, after cultivating joy and appreciation, we must learn to concentrate the mind. This is not about forcing or straining. It is about gathering, collecting, unifying. It is like taking scattered rays of sunlight and focusing them through a lens until they become a beam capable of burning. The Buddha described concentration as a natural result of gladdening the mind. When the mind is happy, it tends to settle. When it is settled, it tends to unify. When it is unified, it becomes powerful. This power is not for its own sake. It is a tool for seeing clearly. A scattered mind cannot see deeply. It is like a flashlight with dying batteries, casting a weak, flickering light that reveals almost nothing. A concentrated mind is like a laser, coherent and bright, capable of illuminating the most subtle truths. Let me tell you a story about a woman who learned this through an unlikely teacher. She was a biologist who studied birds. She spent years in the field, observing, recording, trying to understand the behavior of a particular species of warbler. But the warblers were elusive. They flitted through the undergrowth, never staying still, never giving her more than a brief glimpse. Her data was frustratingly incomplete. Then one day, an old naturalist visited her field site. He watched her for a while, then said something that stopped her. He said, "You are trying to see them with your eyes. But your eyes are too fast. They jump from movement to movement, never settling. You need to see them with your stillness." She did not understand at first. But he showed her. He found a spot near where the warblers fed, and he sat down. He did not move. He barely blinked. He just sat there, utterly still, for what felt like forever. After about an hour, something remarkable happened. The warblers began to ignore him. They went about their business as if he were just another rock, another tree. He saw things she had never seen. Mating rituals, feeding patterns, social hierarchies. All because he had learned to be still. She started practicing stillness herself. It was hard at first. Her mind wanted to plan, to analyze, to move on to the next observation. But gradually, she learned. She found that the more still she became, the more the warblers revealed. They trusted her stillness. They showed her their real lives. This is what concentration does for the mind. It creates a stillness that allows reality to reveal itself. When the mind stops its constant movement, its constant grasping, its constant planning, things begin to show themselves as they truly are. Not as we want them to be. Not as we fear them to be. Just as they are. The Buddha described 4 stages of concentration, called jhanas. Each one is deeper, more refined, more peaceful than the last. The first jhana has directed thought and evaluation. You are still thinking about the breath, still adjusting, still working with it. But there is also joy and pleasure arising from the stillness. The second jhana drops the thinking. The mind becomes confident and unified. The joy and pleasure remain, but now they are born of stillness rather than effort. The third jhana drops the joy. Not because joy is bad, but because it is still slightly active. It still stirs the mind. What remains is a profound pleasure, a deep contentment, a sense of fulfillment that needs nothing. The fourth jhana drops even this pleasure. What remains is equanimity, perfect stillness, utter purity of awareness. These stages are not achievements to grasp. They are natural developments, like a river flowing downhill. When you remove the obstacles, when you stop damming the stream with your distractions, the mind naturally flows toward deeper peace. Your job is not to force the flow. Your job is to remove the obstacles. The biologist eventually wrote a groundbreaking book about the warblers. She credited her discovery not to her scientific training, but to her practice of stillness. She said, "I thought I needed better equipment, more funding, more time. What I really needed was to get out of my own way. When I finally stopped chasing, the birds came to me." This is the promise of concentration. When you stop chasing your experience, when you stop trying to manipulate every moment into what you want it to be, your experience starts to reveal its true nature. And that revelation is the beginning of wisdom. In the context of breath meditation, concentration means gathering all your attention on the breath until the breath fills your entire awareness. Not just the air moving at your nostrils, but the whole body breathing, every cell participating. The breath becomes the background and the foreground, the figure and the ground. There is nothing else. Just this. Just now. When the mind is this concentrated, it becomes a powerful tool for insight. It can see things that were always there but previously invisible. It can see how thoughts arise, how feelings condition reactions, how the whole machine of suffering operates. And in seeing, it begins to let go. There is another story about a man who discovered the power of concentration in a completely different context. He was a watchmaker, famous for his ability to repair the most intricate timepieces. His hands were steady, his eyes were sharp, but his real secret was something else. He could focus for hours without distraction. While others grew impatient, while others jumped from task to task, he could sit with a single tiny gear until he understood exactly why it was not working. One day, a young apprentice asked him how he did it. He said, "I do not do anything. I just get out of the way. The watch shows me what it needs. My job is to be still enough to see it." The apprentice did not understand. So the watchmaker gave him a broken pocket watch and told him to find the problem. The apprentice looked at it for a few minutes, then started poking at different parts, trying this, trying that, getting nowhere. The watchmaker took it back. He held it in his palm and just looked at it. For 10 minutes, he did nothing but look. Then he reached in with a tiny tool, made one small adjustment, and the watch began to tick. The apprentice said, "How did you know?" The watchmaker said, "I did not know. I let the watch tell me. But to hear it, I had to be completely quiet inside." This is concentration. This is the mind that can hear what life is saying because it has stopped shouting its own demands. This is the mind that can see what needs to be seen because it has stopped chasing its own shadows. In your practice, concentration means giving the breath your full attention. Not divided attention. Not attention that is always ready to jump to the next thing. Full attention. Undivided. Unwavering. Like a mother watching her child play in a crowded place. She sees everything else, but her center is always with the child. Nothing can distract her from that. When you breathe with this kind of attention, something shifts. The breath becomes more than just air moving in and out. It becomes a living presence. It becomes a companion. It becomes a teacher. And in the stillness of that attention, the mind begins to show you its deepest secrets. Now we come to the most subtle and perhaps most misunderstood aspect of this entire journey. After all the work of building concentration, after cultivating joy and stillness, the Buddha points us toward the ultimate step. Letting go of the building itself. This is where the path turns back on itself. We have learned to fabricate skillfully. We have learned to calm the breath, to gladden the mind, to cultivate joy, to concentrate attention. But all of these are still fabrications. They are still things the mind is making. And anything that is made can be unmade. Anything that arises can cease. The final teaching is about releasing even these. Not rejecting them, not abandoning them in frustration, but releasing them with the same tenderness a bird feels releasing the branch it has been resting on. The branch served its purpose. The bird is rested now. It is time to fly. The Buddha described this as climbing a ladder and letting go of each rung as you reach for the next. You do not cling to the first rung once your foot is on the second. You do not carry the ladder with you. Each stage of peace is a platform, not a destination. Each level of concentration is a tool, not a home. The path is a continuous process of release, of letting go of heavier and heavier burdens, until you arrive at a state so light it cannot be weighed at all. Let me tell you a story about a woman who learned this through great loss. She was a master potter, renowned for her exquisite ceramic vessels. She worked with clay for over 40 years. Her hands knew the material in a way her mind never could. Her pieces were in galleries and private collections around the world. The clay was her life, her identity, her greatest joy. Then came the fire. A wildfire swept through her community, destroying her home, her studio, her kiln, every piece she had ever made. Decades of work, gone in hours. She stood in the ashes, surrounded by shards of what had been her life's work, and felt something inside her die. For months, she could not work. She could not even look at clay. The grief was too heavy. Friends tried to encourage her, tried to help her see that she still had her skill, her knowledge, her hands. But she could not hear them. She was too identified with what she had lost. Then one day, she was walking on a beach near her temporary home. She noticed a patch of wet clay at the water's edge. Without thinking, she knelt down and scooped some up. Her hands began to move, completely on their own, shaping the wet earth into a small bowl. It was rough, imperfect, nothing like her gallery pieces. But as she held it, something shifted. She realized that the clay had never been in her studio. The clay was everywhere. It was in the earth beneath her feet. It was in the beach where she walked. It was available always, infinite and free. Her attachment had been to the objects, not to the clay itself. And the objects were gone, but the clay remained. More importantly, the relationship between her hands and the clay remained. That could never be taken. She began to work again, but differently. She no longer clung to the results. She made pieces and gave them away. She taught children. She worked with whatever clay was at hand, wherever she happened to be. The fire had taken her possessions, but it had also burned away her attachment. And in that burning, she found a freedom she had never known. This is what the Buddha means by ultimate release. The path is your clay. Concentration is your clay. Mindfulness is your clay. Discernment is your clay. They are beautiful. They are essential. But they are not the destination. The destination is what remains when even the finest vessel is returned to the earth. The fourth tetrad of breath meditation, the one focused on mental qualities, lays this out in 4 steps. First, you breathe in and out, focusing on inconstancy. You see that everything you have built, even your peace, even your concentration, is subject to change. It arises. It passes away. Nothing built lasts forever. Second, you breathe in and out, focusing on dispassion. You see that clinging to even these beautiful states creates subtle stress. The peace of concentration is real, but clinging to it turns it into a cage. You learn to enjoy it without needing it, to rest in it without grasping it. Third, you breathe in and out, focusing on cessation. You allow the fabricating activity to stop. You stop building. You stop making. You just rest in the awareness that is prior to all making. The mind, for a moment, ceases its endless construction project. Fourth, you breathe in and out, focusing on relinquishment. You let it all go. The path. The goal. The seeker. The found. All of it. You give it back. There is another story that illustrates this beautifully. A man had spent 20 years studying with a Zen master. He had mastered every teaching, every meditation, every koan. He felt ready. He went to the master and said, "I have completed the path. I am ready for final enlightenment." The master said nothing. He just picked up a teacup and poured tea into it. He kept pouring even after the cup was full. Tea spilled everywhere, over the table, onto the floor. The man jumped back and said, "Master, stop. The cup is full. Nothing more can go in." The master looked at him and said, "Exactly. You are like this cup. You are so full of your own knowledge, your own achievements, your own sense of having completed something, that there is no room for anything new. If you want to taste the tea of enlightenment, you must first empty your cup." The man understood. He had been clinging to his practice, his progress, his identity as an advanced student. All of it had become another obstacle. He bowed, and in that bowing, let it all go. This is the final letting go. Not letting go of the difficult things only. Not letting go of the painful things only. Letting go of the beautiful things too. Letting go of the peace you have worked so hard to find. Letting go of the insights you have struggled to attain. Letting go of the very path that brought you here. Why? Because the peace you have found is still a fabrication. The insights you have attained are still concepts. The path that brought you here is still a construction. And the truth, the real truth, is prior to all construction. It cannot be built. It can only be recognized when the building stops. The potter eventually built a new studio. She made new pieces. But she never again suffered when one broke. She knew the clay was infinite. She knew the real treasure was not in the pots, but in the hands that shaped them, and the awareness that watched it all. This is the freedom the Buddha offered. Not a better building, but the end of building altogether. Not a better dream, but waking up. Now we arrive at the final teaching, the culmination of everything we have explored together. After understanding that the mind is the forerunner, after learning to work with the breath, after gladdening and concentrating the mind, after releasing even our attachments to the path, what remains? What is this freedom the Buddha pointed toward? The answer is both simple and utterly profound. What remains is your own true nature, the mind before it started building, before it started fabricating, before it got lost in its own creations. The Buddha called this nibbana, the unconditioned, the deathless. It is not a place you go. It is not a state you achieve. It is what is always already here, hidden behind the clouds of your thoughts, obscured by the storms of your emotions, but never actually touched by any of it. Think of it like this. You have been walking through a house your whole life, but you have never noticed the walls. You have been so focused on the furniture, the decorations, the people coming and going, that you have missed the structure that contains it all. The walls have always been there, supporting everything, making everything possible. But you have never seen them. The deathless is like those walls. It has always been there. It is the context for everything you experience. But you have been too busy with the contents of experience to notice the context. Let me tell you a final story, about a man who spent his entire life searching for something he already had. He was a gem collector, obsessed with finding the perfect stone. He traveled to remote mountains, dove to the bottom of the sea, spent his entire fortune on expeditions and equipment. His collection grew, filled with rare and beautiful gems from around the world. But he was never satisfied. There was always one more stone to find, one more treasure to acquire. One day, an old sage came to his home. The collector proudly showed off his collection, stone after stone, each more magnificent than the last. The sage looked at each one, nodding politely. Then he asked a strange question. He said, "What is that bag you carry around your neck?" The collector looked down. He had worn a small leather pouch around his neck for as long as he could remember. His mother had given it to him when he was a child, telling him it contained something precious. He had never opened it. He had been so busy searching for precious things elsewhere that he had forgotten about the one he already carried. With trembling hands, he opened the pouch. Inside was a single stone, small and unpolished. He held it up to the light. It was a diamond. Not just any diamond, but the finest he had ever seen. It had been around his neck his entire life, and he had never known it. This is the tragedy of the human condition. We spend our lives searching for something we already possess. We think freedom is somewhere out there, in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next acquisition. But it is not out there. It is in here. It has always been in here. We just never thought to look. The Buddha's entire teaching is an invitation to look. Not to acquire something new, but to recognize something that has always been true. The mind is the forerunner. You are the architect of your experience. And the architect can lay down its tools. The builder can rest. What remains when the building stops is not nothing. It is everything. This is why the path is sometimes called a going home. You are not going somewhere you have never been. You are returning to somewhere you have always lived, but forgotten. The familiarity of it, when you first glimpse it, is unmistakable. It is like recognizing a face you have loved your whole life but have not seen for years. You know it instantly. You have always known it. The practices we have explored, the breath, the concentration, the gladdening, the releasing, are all just ways of clearing away the debris so you can see what has always been there. They are not the destination. They are the cleaning supplies. Use them well, and one day you will look up and realize the house was always clean. It was just covered in dust you mistook for the walls. There is a story about a woman who experienced this directly. She was a nurse who had worked in hospice for over 30 years, caring for the dying. She had seen hundreds of people take their last breath. She thought she understood death. But it was not until her own diagnosis, her own terminal illness, that she began to understand life. In her final months, she kept a journal. She wrote about the fear, the grief, the letting go of everything she had loved. But she also wrote about something unexpected. As everything she had identified with fell away, as her body weakened, as her roles and relationships began to recede, something else emerged. She described it as a vast, peaceful presence that had always been there, hidden behind the noise of her busy life. She wrote, "I have spent my whole life thinking I was this small self, this nurse, this mother, this friend. Now I see that I was never any of those things. Those were just costumes I wore. What I really am is what remains when the costumes are removed. And what remains is infinite." She died peacefully, with none of the fear she had expected. She had found the diamond around her own neck. This freedom is available to you. Not someday. Not after more practice, more effort, more striving. Right now, in this very moment, while you are listening to these words, the deathless is here. The unconditioned is here. The walls of the house are holding everything together. Can you feel them? Can you sense the space in which all this arises and passes away? The breath comes and goes. The thoughts come and go. The feelings come and go. But the awareness that knows all this, the space in which it all happens, does not come and go. It is always here. Always present. Always available. That is your true nature. That is what you have been seeking. And you have never been without it. So here is where we leave this exploration. Not with a conclusion, because the path has no conclusion. It is a circle, always returning to the beginning, but each time with deeper understanding. The mind is the forerunner. This is where we started. This is where we end. But now you know what it means. Now you have some sense of how to work with it. The man with the diamond around his neck spent the rest of his life giving away his collection. He had no need for it anymore. He traveled, but not to acquire. He just visited, just appreciated, just enjoyed the beauty of the world without needing to possess it. He was free. Thank you for spending this time at Monk's Temple. May you go from this place with a deeper trust in your own mind's potential for freedom. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free. This concludes our exploration together.